Sometimes, the truth is buried so deeply it takes an act of nature to uncover it. In 1986, a quiet Connecticut town became the epicenter of one of the most chilling cases in history. What happened to Helle Crafts shocked the world, not just because of the crime, but because of the horrifying way her secret came to light. This is the story of the woman who vanished, and the icy discovery that solved it. Before we begin, we want to express our deepest condolences to the family and loved ones of Helle Crafts. The events we're about to recount are deeply tragic and heartbreaking. We approach this case with the utmost respect for the victim and those forever impacted by this tragedy. Helle Crafts seemed to have the perfect life. She was a 39-year-old flight attendant, a mother of 3, and married to Richard Crafts, a respected pilot and part-time police officer. The Crafts lived in Newtown, Connecticut, a picture-perfect suburban town where life was calm, quiet, and predictable. But behind closed doors, not everything was as perfect as it seemed. Helle Crafts was a woman full of life and love. Born in Denmark in 1947, she grew up with dreams of adventure and exploration. Her radiant personality and determination led her to pursue a career as a flight attendant with Pan Am Airlines, where she traveled the world and formed lifelong friendships. In 1979, Helle met Richard Crafts, a charismatic pilot with whom she quickly fell in love. The two seemed to share a passion for aviation and adventure, and within a few years, they were married. They settled in the idyllic town of Newtown, Connecticut, where they raised 3 beautiful children. To those who knew her, Helle was the epitome of grace and kindness. She adored her children and balanced her demanding career with her role as a devoted mother. But behind the picture-perfect facade of her life, cracks were beginning to form in her marriage. Helle's close friends would later reveal that she confided in them about Richard's volatile temper and suspected infidelity. Despite these challenges, she remained hopeful for a better future for herself and her children. Helle's courage shone through in every aspect of her life. Despite the difficulties, she worked tirelessly to create a nurturing home for her children. She had an adventurous spirit, a compassionate heart, and a determination to overcome any obstacle. Tragically, that spirit would come face to face with unimaginable darkness. November 18th, 1986, began as a routine day for Helle. She had just returned from a long flight and was looking forward to spending time with her children. Despite the snowy weather, she went about her day as usual, though friends noticed she seemed preoccupied. In the weeks leading up to that day, Helle had taken a decisive step toward regaining control of her life. She had consulted a divorce attorney and hired a private investigator to document Richard's infidelity. Her courage to confront the truth about her marriage was a testament to her strength and resilience. But that evening, Helle vanished. Her children were told she had gone to visit family in Denmark, but her friends immediately grew suspicious. Helle would never leave without telling them, and her absence at work raised red flags among her colleagues. As days turned into weeks, the search for Helle intensified. Friends and neighbors distributed flyers, and investigators began piecing together the last known moments of her life. The deeper they dug, the more troubling the details became. As the mystery deepened, investigators uncovered troubling inconsistencies in Richard's statements. He claimed Helle had simply left, but no airline records showed her boarding a flight, and her passport remained at home. One neighbor reported hearing unusual noises late at night, the sound of machinery operating near the Crafts' property during a snowstorm. At first, they dismissed it as routine yard work, but the memory would later haunt them. Investigators discovered that Richard had rented a woodchipper shortly after Helle's disappearance. A local snowplow driver came forward with a chilling account. He had seen Richard using the woodchipper near Lake Zoar in the middle of the night, a strange sight during a snowstorm. The police also learned that Richard had recently purchased a large freezer, which he claimed was for storing food. However, its sudden acquisition and disappearance around the time of Helle's vanishing raised significant concerns. A deeper dive into Richard's behavior revealed a man known for his temper and a tendency to control those around him. Colleagues and acquaintances described him as cold and calculating, a stark contrast to Helle's warmth and compassion. Amid the growing suspicion, Richard's calm demeanor stood out. He continued his daily routines as though nothing had happened, a behavior investigators would later describe as unnervingly detached. In interviews, friends and neighbors painted a picture of Helle as a meticulous planner who never left things to chance. Her disappearance without a trace defied everything they knew about her. The police, initially hesitant to treat the case as foul play, found themselves drawn into a deeper mystery with every passing day. Her colleagues described her as excited but slightly on edge in the days leading up to her disappearance. She had confided to one co-worker about her plans to confront Richard with evidence of his infidelity. With these alarming discoveries, the idyllic suburban town of Newtown began to confront the horrifying possibility that Helle Crafts had not simply disappeared, but had fallen victim to a calculated act of violence. The breakthrough in the case came when a snowplow driver contacted authorities with a startling account. He had seen Richard operating a wood chipper near Lake Zoar during the snowstorm. A peculiar sight given the conditions. Scattered along the shoreline were tiny fragments of bone, strands of hair, and a piece of human fingernail. Forensic experts were brought in to analyze the evidence, which confirmed everyone's worst fears. Among the items found was a tooth with distinctive dental work, which was later identified as belonging to Helle Crafts. The chilling reality was becoming clear. Richard had used the wood chipper to dispose of her remains in an attempt to erase all traces of his crime. It was a gruesome method, one that shocked even the most seasoned investigators. The search expanded, with divers and forensic teams scouring the icy waters and surrounding area. They uncovered additional evidence, including fragments of clothing that matched what Helle had last been seen wearing. This meticulous process provided investigators with the foundation they needed to build their case. Every fragment of evidence told a story of a calculated and horrifying act of violence. One of the most damning discoveries was a chainsaw recovered from the water, its blade still bearing traces of human tissue. Forensic analysis confirmed it had been used in the dismemberment of Helle's body. This key piece of evidence painted a horrifying picture of the lengths Richard went to in an attempt to cover his tracks. The forensic breakthroughs in this case were groundbreaking. Using emerging DNA technology and dental records, authorities were able to conclusively identify the remains and link Richard to the crime. These findings would set a precedent for future investigations relying on forensic evidence. Among the debris, a piece of paper bearing Richard's handwriting was also found. This small but crucial clue further tied him to the scene and underscored the lengths he went to in an attempt to conceal his actions. The detailed forensic work not only revealed the grisly method of Helle's murder, but also highlighted the calculated nature of Richard's actions. This was not a crime of passion, but a meticulously planned and executed act of violence. As investigators zeroed in on Richard Crafts, his behavior raised further suspicions. Despite his wife's disappearance, he showed little concern and continued about his daily routine as if nothing had happened. During interrogations, Richard's story was riddled with inconsistencies. He claimed Helle had simply left, yet he could not explain the damning evidence found near Lake Zoar. A search of the Crafts home revealed bloodstains on the carpet, which Richard had tried to cover up by cutting out sections and replacing them. These stains were tested and matched to Helle, further implicating him in her murder. Richard's cold and detached demeanor throughout the investigation shocked even seasoned detectives. His attempts to portray himself as innocent were undermined by the mountain of evidence against him. Witnesses also came forward with unsettling accounts of Richard's controlling behavior. Friends of Helle described how she had become increasingly fearful in the months leading up to her disappearance. Further investigation revealed a troubling pattern in Richard's past. Known for his explosive temper and history of infidelity, he had a reputation for manipulation and intimidation. traits that painted a dark portrait of a man capable of committing such a heinous crime. As investigators delved deeper into Richard Crafts' life, they uncovered a tangle of secrets that painted a devastating picture of his motives. At the center of it all was his carefully concealed affair, a betrayal that would ultimately set the stage for Helle Crafts' tragic fate. The other woman was Nancy Dodd, a flight attendant who had met Richard through his work as a pilot. Nancy was vivacious and confident, a younger woman who seemed to embody the freedom and excitement Richard longed for outside the constraints of his marriage. Their relationship wasn't fleeting, it was calculated and sustained, hidden beneath the surface of Richard's seemingly stable home life. For months, he managed to maintain the illusion of normalcy with Helle and their 3 children, while secretly pursuing his relationship with Nancy. But Richard wasn't as discreet as he thought. Perceptive and aware of her husband's patterns, began to notice the changes, the unexplained absences, the late nights, and the growing emotional distance. Suspicion gave way to certainty when Helle took matters into her own hands and hired a private investigator. The private investigator confirmed what she had already feared. Richard Crafts was having an affair. The investigator delivered undeniable evidence, proof of Richard's infidelity. For Helle, this was more than just confirmation of betrayal. It was her leverage. She intended to use the evidence in her divorce proceedings, exposing Richard's secret life in a courtroom for all to see. For a man like Richard, who valued his image and control above all else, this was a direct threat. But the affair wasn't the only pressure Richard was facing. Financially, the divorce would be devastating. The Crafts family lived comfortably with their home in Newtown and the benefits of dual incomes. Helle's role as a flight attendant and Richard's work as a pilot provided a stable foundation for their 3 children. A divorce, however, would change everything. Custody of the children would almost certainly go to Helle, along with a significant portion of their shared assets. Richard's lifestyle, including his penchant for expensive hobbies, would no longer be sustainable. As the investigation revealed, Richard was a man who craved control over his family, his finances, and his reputation. The affair with Nancy Dodd was more than a betrayal of his marriage. It was a glaring liability. Nancy's existence wasn't just a secret to be kept, it was a threat to his entire world. To Helle, Nancy represented the breaking point of the marriage. To Richard, she was proof of his indiscretions, proof that could cost him his family, his finances, and his freedom. By January 1987, Richard Crafts was arrested and charged with the murder of his wife. The case would become one of the most infamous in Connecticut's history. The trial of Richard Crafts began in May 1988, captivating the nation. It was the first time in Connecticut history that a murder conviction would be sought without a complete body. A groundbreaking case for forensic science and legal precedent. Prosecutors presented a mountain of evidence, meticulously piecing together the events leading to Helle's death, the bloodstains in the Crafts home, the fragments of bone and tissue found near Lake Zoar, and the damning testimony of the snowplow driver painted a chilling picture of premeditated murder. The defense attempted to sow doubt, arguing that the lack of a complete body made it impossible to prove Helle was dead. But the evidence was overwhelming. The chainsaw recovered from the lake, still bearing traces of Helle's remains, became a symbol of the brutality of the crime. The prosecution also highlighted Richard's detached behavior, portraying him as a manipulative and calculating individual. Witnesses described his controlling tendencies, further solidifying the narrative of a man desperate to maintain control at all costs. The trial was not without drama. Jurors were visibly shaken during key testimonies, particularly when forensic experts detailed the gruesome methods used to dispose of Helle's body. The audio recordings of Richard's police interviews, in which he showed little emotion, left a lasting impression on everyone in the courtroom. After months of testimony and deliberation, the jury initially deadlocked, resulting in a mistrial. However, a retrial in 1989 delivered a decisive verdict. Guilty of murder, Richard Crafts was sentenced to 50 years in prison, a conviction that brought some sense of justice to Helle's family. For the investigators and prosecutors, the case marked a significant victory for forensic science. The ability to secure a conviction without a body demonstrated the power of emerging technologies and meticulous investigative work. Yet, for Helle's loved ones, the pain of her loss remained. Her children, too young to fully understand the tragedy at the time, grew up with the weight of their mother's memory and the knowledge of their father's actions. After serving decades behind bars for one of Connecticut's most infamous murders, Richard Crafts, the man who thought he could hide his crimes, is now a free man. In January 2020, at the age of 82, Richard was released from prison and transferred to a transitional housing program for veterans in Bridgeport, Connecticut. His release shocked many. Richard had been sentenced to 50 years in prison for the brutal murder of his wife. But due to laws in place at the time of his sentencing, known as statutory good time, Richard's sentence was significantly reduced for good behavior and prison work. By the time of his release, he had served just over 30 years. From the transitional program, Richard was expected to finish the remainder of his sentence in August 2020. His next steps? That remains a mystery. Following his release, Richard has faded into obscurity, avoiding the spotlight and public attention. At 85 years old, his whereabouts today are unknown. Helle Crafts was more than the tragedy that ended her life. She was a mother, a friend, and a woman who brought joy and warmth to everyone she met. Her legacy lives on in the memories of those who loved her and in the landmark case that changed how justice is pursued. The Woodchipper Murder, as it came to be known, serves as a stark reminder of the hidden dangers that can lurk behind closed doors. It also highlights the importance of courage. Helle's friends and family refused to give up, ensuring her story was told and justice was served. In the years since the trial, Helle's case has been studied in law schools and forensic science courses around the world. It stands as a testament to the perseverance of investigators and the advancements in technology that continue to aid in the pursuit of truth. Helle Crafts' case remains one of the most infamous examples of how the truth can't stay buried forever. It's a chilling reminder that even the most picturesque lives can hide the darkest secrets. Behind every door lies a secret. But in this case, the secret lay in the frozen banks of a river. What would you do if someone close to you started acting suspiciously? Could you ever imagine a case as bizarre and horrifying as this one? Let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and join me next time as we explore another case behind closed doors.